Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about product managers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how important is a product manager to a software engineering team? So I'm not sure, this is where you're going to have to allow me to be very loose with my definitions, because I to this day cannot fully grasp. I think I grasp it conceptually, but I can't fully say that I know the difference between a product manager and a product owner. I cannot say that I know, and product people can just allow me to be wrong here, because it's just my ignorance between in the differences where I can't really define it. But if we are talking about an individual whose main focus it is to talk to stakeholders, provide product feedback to the team, so that you sort of know what you're going to develop next and so forth, these people are invaluable to the team, I would say, on average. It depends a little bit on the team as well. Sometimes, you need a product manager or a product owner in some format. It's just that in some teams, you deal with engineering teams that don't really have a need for this sort of work, where, as an example, the DevOps team, or if you're working as I used to do on one of the platform teams, where the only stakeholders you have are almost 99% of the time other software developers or other development teams, then you still have to have a product manager, but it might not be someone who is a traditional product manager, someone who's educated in school, or someone who has working primarily with users or so forth. But I think that a lot of software developers, they underestimate the amount of work that goes into the planning of work. And that's something that you don't really learn until you start going to those sorts of meetings and being involved in that sort of work. And I have been involved in that sort of work, guys, and I can tell you, you think that the time it takes for you to code something is the thing that takes the most amount of time. And sure, in some circumstances, absolutely, I'm not going to deny that in any way, that's going to be the case. But don't underestimate how much of the preparing you're not involved in, because for the average, especially if you're a junior software developer, you just see this backlog with tasks, and then you have these introduction grooming meetings and stuff like that with your product manager or whoever, right? Or your scrum master. I don't know what you're doing, right? That's like magic to you. Like, that card just represents a piece of work, but the time it took to create that card can be anything from, like, it was just a 1 hour thing, right? And honest to God, most of the time the way we write these story cards feels like it took 1 hour to do this. But in many cases, the epics and like the things that they are doing, it takes a lot of time and alignments, and so especially if you're in a large corporation, it can take many weeks of full-time work to manage all of the stuff that goes on in a software engineering team. So product managers, I think, they're critical in a sense. It's the only person that I argue that is, if we think in terms of technical and non-technical people, and by technical people I'd basically say the software engineers, or like the ops people or the QAs or so forth. This is the only truly indispensable non-technical person that has to be there. I will go as far as to say that it's difficult. You can make it work with just a product manager, but usually I say that a designer would be necessary in 99% of the time as well, if you're making like visual things in some fashion, because designs and artboards and so forth, it's a world of difference between. I would even go as far as to say it's practically impossible for software engineers to truly feel comfortable developing something with a graphical interface without having artboards of how the thing is going to look. I've been there many times, and it's very difficult to make people feel comfortable. And it's very difficult to produce something that looks nice, but it can work. If you're working on like some type of internal system that doesn't really have any requirements on design or anything like that, you can make do without the designer. But you can't make do, in my opinion, without the product manager. Even if that product manager is just one of the developers, someone has to be accountable for creating the stories, grooming it with the team so that everybody sort of knows what it's up to. You can, of course, just do the thing that some might do, which is just create a request to the team, put it on, like someone writes it down, and then you sort of implement it. But then in essence what you're doing is that you're making every person in the team, or the developers, they become their own product manager, they become the owner of every story, which can work as well, but it's not very effective, and it becomes almost impossible if you have other teams who depend on the work that you do, because it becomes very ineffective if every single software developer has to be in different sorts of meetings, and you don't have anybody who takes central ownership of the backlog and prioritizes the work. And that's why I believe that the product manager is the most important non-technical person that a software team can have. And it should be, in my opinion, very rare that you don't have such an individual, because very often the software developers, it's unfeasible for you, I think, to know all the things about the code and then also have the answers to all the product related questions. Many times the specifications don't include everything that you need to know to deliver something, and the software developers, they have questions about implementation details. How should this work? How should that work? And it is the product manager's job, or the product owner, whoever, to know what the expectations on the deliverable are, basically giving the software developers the definition of done. Because they are, in essence, they become like a spokesperson, ideally, for the users and for the business need. And it's the business who are ordering the work from the software developers. So it's a little bit weird to have the software developer basically decide when the work is done. It has to be defined by an external party, I think, and then also ideally evaluated by that external party, but not always necessary. So for me, the product manager, it becomes basically the person who should have the answers to all the questions, and that is, I think, the toughest, one of the most meaningless people you can have on average in a team. And is a junior product manager. It's basically it's borderline a pointless person, because the bulk value of having such an individual is that individual should know the business and all the requirements and all the users and so forth to the point where they know what they want, so that they can tell the team and the team members what should be built, when it's done, who to talk to, and for questions and so forth. And if they can't do that themselves, they basically just become they're basically a secretary. They become a secretary where they write the card so somebody else doesn't have to, and then they go and ask other people to come and go into meetings with the software developers and so forth and so forth. So domain knowledge, I would say, domain knowledge in this business space is absolutely critical to be an effective product manager, if you ask me, at the very least. So what I want you to take away from this is that a product manager, I would say, is a good one. It makes an enormous difference if you have a good one or a bad one. If you have a good one, then you basically have seamless answers to all your questions about product specifications and requirements and things like that, or who do you talk to when you need to get in hold of someone when you don't know things, etc., etc. The more the product manager knows about the business domain of the company and the people in it, the better. It's the best person to have for all this sort of non-technical work, whereas our equivalent of a product manager, in essence, should be a senior software developer who knows everything about the domain in the code area, if that makes sense. So they are, I like to think about the tech lead, or like the most senior person, and the product manager as two sides of the same coin. They're all each other's counterpart. One is the technical person, one is the product, like the management product person, but they're ideally at the same sort of experience level, and if you have that, this is the most important person in the world. If you have a junior person who sort of doesn't know anything about the business or doesn't know anybody in the company, it's basically it's an almost pointless person, because they can't really provide any value to the team apart from writing story cards and then going on a hunt, finding more people who know something and asking them for help. Which is a very difficult position to be in, where you usually start that way as a product manager, but ideally you should very quickly start making some really important and useful connections within the company, so you can start mitigating a lot of that going back and forth between different stakeholders all the time, and actually knowing things yourself, as well as being able to facilitate the work for the development team. Have a great day.